upon a 12-year-old female. She appears to be stabbed.
She appears to be what?
Stabbed.
Stabbed?
Correct.
Okay.
Sir, you still there?
Yes.
Hi, sir. So are you with this 12-year-old female?
Yes, she says she's having trouble breathing. She said she was stabbed multiple times.
She stabbed her classmate 19 times and left her for dead, all to appease a faceless and fictional character. Now Morgan Geyser wants to be released from a state mental institution. We're breaking down the key developments in this case as she petitions for release. Criminal defense attorney Bob Motta. Welcome to Sidebar presented by Law&Crime. I'm Elizabeth Millner. 10 years ago, at just 12 years old, while playing a game of hide and seek in a local Waukesha, Wisconsin park, Morgan Geyser committed the unthinkable. She stabbed her classmate Peyton Lautner 19 times, while Geyser's friend Anissa Weir urged her on. The two preteens left Peyton for dead and went on their way. Peyton thankfully was able to crawl to safety and flag down a cyclist who called 911.
He came upon a 12-year-old female. She appears to be stabbed.
She appears to be what?
Stabbed.
Stabbed?
Correct.
Okay.
Sir, you still there?
Yes.
Hi, sir. So are you with this 12-year-old female?
Yes, she says she's having trouble breathing. She said she was stabbed multiple times.
Stabbed multiple times?
Yes.
Okay, sir. Are you with her right now?
Yes.
Is she awake?
She's awake.
Is she breathing?
Yeah, she's breathing. She said she can take shallow breaths. She's alert.
Okay, stay with her. We're sending the police department. Don't hang up, okay?
Oh,
Hold on just a minute. Don't hang up.
Okay.
Okay. Hold on just a minute, sir. We're sending officers.
Oh.
Is there any assailant around?
I didn't even look. I don't see anybody.
It's a dead end. Okay, stay right with her, sir. Is she on the ground or is she standing up?
No, she's laying on the grass.
Laying on the grass. Stay right with her. Just let me know if she is remaining conscious or not, okay?
Okay.
Is there any bleeding going on?
Her clothing has got blood on it.
Where are the wounds? Do you see where the wounds are?
No, I don't know if I should be rolling her over and checking or not. Do you know where?
Okay, just stay with her and just let me know if she's conscious or alert or stops breathing or anything. Hold on, I'm going to talk to the ambulance. Police are also en route.
Okay, thank you. I'm bothering you at all? My shade? Okay.
Just keep her in that position. Just let me know on her breathing.
Once the two were caught by authorities, they blamed the stabbing on a tall, thin, faceless man. And as you may have guessed it, he wasn't even real. The case gained notoriety across the world and became known as the Slender Man stabbing. Morgan Geyser and Anissa Weir were both convicted for their roles in the infamous crime and sent to mental institutions. Now one of those girls is asking to be released from the state mental hospital. Morgan Geyser, who brutally stabbed Peyton Lautner, is asking a Waukesha County Circuit judge to be released. She virtually appeared inside a Waukesha courtroom on Monday. We'll get to that hearing in just a moment, but first, let's go back to 2014. Three young girls had a sleepover. They go to a park. Geyser stabs Peyton Lautner as Anissa Weir eggs her on. Lautner barely survived her wounds, according to officials. Once officials captured Geyser and Weir on a Wisconsin interstate, the two were reportedly cool, calm, and collected. They told investigators they're earning the rights to become servants to the fictional Slender Man, and if they failed, their families would be killed. Once the case went through the courts, they faced being tried as adults for the attempted murder. Both girls pleaded not guilty due to mental illness, but ultimately took plea deals to avoid prison. Anissa Weir received 25 years in the Wisconsin Department of Health Services, but Morgan Geyser received 40 years. Weir petitioned for the same conditional release that Geyser is asking for now. Weir was granted that conditional release in 2021 and allowed to live with her father. Her conditions included requirements for outpatient psychiatric treatment and GPS monitoring, but that was waived in September 2023. So could Morgan Geyser get the same opportunity? She appeared via Zoom for a scheduling conference. Let's take a listen to what happened inside that Wisconsin courtroom.
Well, the matter is here today with regard to a petition filed for conditional release that was filed on January 17th. I have the petition. District Attorney has the petition?
Yes.
All right. Upon the filing of the petition, court's responsibility then is to appoint doctors to examine Ms. Geyser, and then for those doctors to submit a report to the court and to the parties. had at the, previously, we've had other petitions and we've appointed doctors. Does the, how does the parties talked about, conferred with regard to how to proceed?
We did, Judge. Both Mr. Sapakowicz and I think it would make sense for the same doctors to be appointed.
All right.
Certainly on our end, we're asking for Dr. Kenneth Robbins. That's who we're requesting. I think the state is asking for Dr. Collins.
We are, Judge, and Dr. Lundbaum was the third doctor that's previously been appointed. As Mr. Cotton indicated, I think we both agree that it makes sense to have those same 3 doctors appointed.
All right. The court's satisfied with each of those doctors as being appropriate to conduct the examination. The court will then appoint Dr. Deborah Collins. She'd be appointed on behalf of the state. Court will appoint Dr. Robbins, Kenneth Robbins, on behalf of Ms. Geyser, and the court will appoint Dr. Lundholm on behalf of the court.
This is a really tough case, and it shows you the world is super scary. And sometimes you don't know what to do when you get injured. So when things go wrong, like a work injury, a car accident, even a social security disability issue, you need champions in your corner. So here's where Pond Lee Hockey comes into the picture. They're a powerhouse legal team known for turning the tables in your favor. They're not just lawyers, they're relentless advocates fighting tooth and nail for your rights. And they make sure after an accident, you're never recovering alone. Their track record speaks volumes. They've secured over $100 billion for more than 100,000 injured and disabled clients. When you hire Pond Lee Hockey, you're not just being represented by a single attorney either. You're getting access to the entire team with over 250 years of combined courtroom experience. So if you're ready to turn your work injury legal battles into victories, check out Pond Lee Hockey at www.pondleehockey.com/LC sidebar, or pick up the phone and call them at 833-669-4043. To discuss the case and upcoming hearing, we're joined by criminal defense attorney and host of the Defense Diaries podcast, Bob Motta. Bob, thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time. So, Bob, this was a case that stunned the world. A young girl almost died after being stabbed by Geyser. In your opinion, has she served enough time, and do you think she'll be released from the mental hospital?
Tough question. Maybe. Like, it's really a maybe to both answers, and that's really because we just don't know what the doctors are going to come back with in terms of the evaluations. If the doctors say, look, she had something going on mentally, we think that we've been able to get it fixed, and we feel that she's in a good place, then yeah, I think that she's probably served enough time. Fortunately, the victim didn't die. As brutal as the crime was itself and kind of shocking to the conscience, thankfully she lived, so in light of that, in light of the fact that her partner in crime's already out, if she's good to go mentally, then I think that she's probably been in long enough.
And some might say Morgan was young and she didn't know any better. I mean, she was just 12 years old when this crime was committed. But if the victim in this case would have died from the stabbing, would we even be having this conversation? Would she even be possibly considered for conditional release?
Probably not. Probably not. I mean, that's, we're going from attempt to the actual homicide itself, which is a much different evaluation, but I mean, that doesn't remove the fact that she was 12, and it's just not a developed mind. We can try, like, I think we talked about it last time, it was a very adult act in terms of the violence and the level of violence that took place. But the bottom line is that she was a kid with an undeveloped mind. There's no cheating time in terms of aging, I mean, it's only life experience and time that can make you, fully developed mentally. And she just didn't have that. So, I mean, that will always have to be taken into consideration. But if the victim had passed away, then I'd have a hard time thinking that she'd be getting out now.
Morgan's lawyer spoke out in a press conference after Monday's hearing.
We're very optimistic this time around. I think it's been very difficult for her. You look at Morgan as somebody who was 11 years old, 12 years old when this first happened, and she's now spent nearly half her life in custody. So I think the whole process has certainly weighed on her. It's weighed on the victim's family too. I think everybody has been impacted by this, but there comes a point where you do something as a juvenile and you're not legally responsible, you ought to come home at some point.
What can you share with us about how she's feeling right now?
She's feeling optimistic. I thought she looked really good today. You could see her on the screen. She has full privileges at the hospital. She's getting out. She's under supervised watch. She's doing very well.
Do you expect any objections to her release from the victim's family?
It could happen. I don't know what the victim's family is going to say. All I know is what the client is doing. I think she's doing very well. So, when a person has reached the maximum amount of privileges they can have at the hospital, there's not much more they can do there to address their needs. The rest of the needs have to be addressed in the community.
And a judge ordered those evaluations of Morgan. Those reports are due within weeks. What can you tell us about what typically goes into those evaluations, if you can speak on that question?
Yeah, I mean, typically what they'll do is they'll get them in, and they'll go through a battery of psychological tests that are pre-developed. I mean, this isn't just like a doctor sitting there kind of like gabbing with her. There's going to be a battery of tests, probably a couple of different diagnostic tests that'll be run. And then at that point, the doctor will evaluate her answers. They're always looking for things like malingering or lying, and to try to figure out if the patient, or in this situation, the defendant, is being honest with the doctors, because it's tough. I mean, if you're the doctor in that situation, you want to make sure that you're getting it right, because that the judge is going to be depending entirely on your opinion with respect to whether or not they're going to release her. So, that's what we can expect. And I imagine that we'll get a pretty thorough report that will be generated as well, so that we'll be actually able to dig into it and see what the doctors thought.
And let's speak a little bit about the victim in this case. Is it possible we could hear from victim Peyton Lautner? Will she be able to speak out in court? Do you know if a victim advocate possibly could speak out in court? What if there's the possibility Peyton Lautner and her family are absolutely vehemently against Morgan Geyser being released from the mental hospital? Is it possible that'll have any weight into the outcome of the decision?
You would hope so. It would have to have weight, you would hope. Now, I don't know in this situation if a victim impact statement will be allowed, typically for sentencing, obviously, and I know for paroles, like for straight parole board hearings, oftentimes the victims can come in. Oftentimes the state's attorneys who prosecuted the cases will come in, and they'll either oppose or, they can be in favor of. It depends on where Peyton's mindset is in the family. I mean, she may realize also that she was a kid, that they were all kids when this happened, and that things have changed. I mean, if she's a forgiving soul and they feel satisfied that, whatever was going on with her at the time has been remedied, then maybe she'll allow for it. But in terms of, how much impact it will have on the judge making the decision whether or not to release her, it's hard to say. I'm certain it would have some impact. But, if you've got a doctor that's saying, look, she's good to go, I feel exceptionally confident in saying that. I think that over the objections of the victim, that she'd probably get released.
Morgan Geyser has petitioned for conditional release before, but withdrew that petition. I want to know what makes this time so different. During this week's court hearing, Morgan's lawyers did speak that she's doing well and being successful inside the in the mental health institute. But again, what makes this time so different? Do we think that maturity, slowly developing brain, is that at all giving weight to this time being different for her to get conditional release?
Yeah, I think so. I think time is her friend. I think when she filed the earlier petition for early release, I think that was a couple of years ago. If you're the attorney handling that, you're trying to look at it objectively, realizing that your client wants out, but to go in on it and thinking based on what from doctors. And I'm assuming that the attorney had spoken to the staff of where she's housed and had gotten some information that may not have been helpful come a hearing, and, advised his client, look, I think you're close. I don't think you're quite there yet. And I think that if we make this move now, that it could hurt you down the road in terms of you trying to get out in, say, a couple of years where, we've got better reports. If we go in and fail on this one, it'll reflect negatively, and it'll give the judge pause, So I have to think that it was a combination of all those things in terms of why they pulled it back and decided to wait.
And Morgan Geyser's cohort, so to speak, Anissa Weir, was granted that conditional release nearly 3 years ago. Does that help Morgan's case? And if so, could her release, if it's favorable, if the doctors agree that it's favorable towards Morgan Geyser being released, could it look similar to Anissa's as far as GPS monitoring, mandatory psychiatric treatment? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it is helpful for certain. I think that Morgan was the more active participant. So, I mean, that works against her. But I think that it'll look exactly like what her cohort did, because, at the end of the day, she's going to have to continue to get treatment. Everyone's going to want that. Everyone's going to want to know that she just didn't, pull a fast one and get out, based on that, behaving well. We all want to know that she's in good shape mentally. And additionally, they're definitely going to keep track of her. Now, I think that her friend's GPS ended. Like they didn't keep her on quite as tight of a leash as I think they'll keep Morgan for certain.
And if, say, she were released and there was ever that chance she commits another crime, what type of punishment would she face?
Depends on the crime, right? I mean, if it's a violent crime, it won't be good. If it's a violent crime that's similar to this in nature, I'm sure she'll be getting a max penalty, because at that point we'll have realized, oh man, wow, she fooled us all. When she got out, she fooled the doctors. It's a real threat to society at large. And I think that they would definitely throw the book, especially if it's a crime of like extreme violence like this. At that point, God forbid. I hope that's not the case. I hope that she's right. I hope that they've been able to help her mentally, and I hope that she's in a good space, and I hope that she can move on and have a normal life, which will be tough. This thing's always going to be sticking around with her. It's going to be one of those stories that you can't shake throughout your life, So I'm wishing her the best if she gets out.
And Bob, say there is that chance that it doesn't go in her favor and the judge does deny that conditional release. Is there at all a possibility that she could petition for that conditional release again, maybe in the future?
Oh yeah, for certain. Yeah. She can, it's just like, it's similar to parole, essentially once you become eligible for it, you can continue to petition for it. Many times parolees are denied, several times before they're released. And I think this would be the same thing. It'll be interesting, but this is different because it really weighs entirely on the evaluation of the doctors. That this isn't like a straight up, has she been, in terms of her punishment, has she served enough time? So has she been fully rehabilitated? And that is one of the questions where you're dealing with parole. That's one of the primary questions. Now, I have long thoughts on whether people are actually rehabilitated in prison. I tend to think not, but this is different. She was getting treatment, so it's an entirely different type of evaluation. So yeah, if she's denied, I'm sure she'll be coming back, and she absolutely has the ability to do so.
All right, Bob Motta, a criminal defense attorney and host of the Defense Diaries podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And of course, we'll have to wait to see what that outcome will be. A judge ordered the psychologist reports be ready by March 1st, and a competency hearing is slated for April. We'll continue to keep an eye on the latest and bring you the most important updates as they develop. Thanks for joining us, and please subscribe to us anywhere you listen to your podcast, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. I'm Elizabeth Millner, and this has been Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime.